All right, it looks like it's about time to start, so I'm just going to dive in. This is the project update for Metric Store, which we have built for Cloud Foundry Observability. My name is Johanna Ratliff. I am an engineer at Pivotal. And hello. Short disclaimer before we start. I'm not feeling great, so this is going to be a quick talk. So I'm an engineer at Pivotal. That is my handle on Twitter, if you're on Twitter. Yeah, let's get started. So why are we here? Why have we built this thing you've never heard of called Metric Store? So what is Metric Store? To start, Metric Store is, this talk is going to be about what is Metric Store, where it goes in the platform architecture, how to leverage it to improve your visibility in terms of what your platform is doing, but also as an app developer, what your apps are doing. And quick disclaimer, this talk is not about Loggregator. We consume downstream from Loggregator, but this is not a Loggregator talk. It's also not about log cache, though you will find out there are a few similarities between the two products. And we leverage Prometheus Query Language a lot. We leverage PromQL as the main vector through which you consume information out of log cache, but this is not going to be an extensive how-to on using PromQL either. So let's talk a little bit about what Metric Store is. First, the specs. You've heard of log cache, and that's kind of your ephemeral self-pruning storage that you have a lot more filterability and a lot more leverage with what information you're getting out of the fire hose. So this just applies persistence to the same concept. We're giving you those same tools to be able to extract information about your platform and about your apps out from this massive logging pipe that you've probably experienced a large stream of data and having to filter that yourself. This one really puts the responsibility back onto the platform to not only persist that data, but still give you those correct tools for filtering. It consumes downstream from Loggregator, from the reverse log proxy. And what that means is that basically anything that you're putting into the Loggregator pipe is going to end up in Metric Store. So anything that you have gotten into the Loggregator throughput through an agent, you're going to have this queryability and this filtering ability through Metric Store because everything is consuming downstream from that Loggregator pipe. It has an InfluxDB backing. It's structured on top of that query engine and leverages the PromQL abilities there, but it's built so that you can just plug and play with your Cloud Foundry platform already. And you get really fast querying. Things are set up within Influx and things have been optimized between the main fields that we've got coming in on those Loggregator envelopes. We've optimized the storage from log cache for a standard metrics. Good. For a standard Metric Store, for a standard Cloud Foundry deployment, you get a pretty fast querying experience versus dumping all of your Cloud Foundry metrics into any general place. This one has been specially curated so that you get each of the metrics' main priorities stored in a way that your results from each query are coming back pretty quickly. And you also get a mature query language, right? Like we didn't write you our own query language to leverage this. We've taken something that has very good documentation and a very healthy community behind it. That asterisk on architecture similar to Logcache, we forked the original architecture from Logcache. So let's look at leveraging the Prometheus API that's on top of Metric Store. So these are your 5 standard endpoints that these are your 5 standard endpoints from Prometheus that we have implemented in Metric Store. So you can use the Prometheus documentation in its wholly accurate fashion against the Metric Store product itself. So you'd have your Cloud Foundry, you deploy Metric Store downstream, and then you've got all of the power of Prometheus Query Language behind what you're trying to extract out of your platform data. Cool. So let's take a look at some examples of how you might leverage this. For example, if I was an app developer, I can still leverage this. I don't need to be admin in order to use everything about Metric Store and PromQL. So I can take, for example, my app GUID, and because it's synced with UAA and CAPI, we know our permission levels per user and have allocated that down to your query specifics. So if I'm querying something that I'm not allowed to see, Metric Store will block you from that. But if I'm an app developer and I say, hey, this is my app, and CAPI says I have access to this GUID, then I can just do any metrics surrounding that app. I can query and get a happy Prometheus formatted result. So this is just a standard query against CPU usage for my app GUID. And you get your results right there. So we can also do more complex queries, like a range query, breaking this down. This one is against my app GUID. It's for the last 5 minutes in step increments of 1 second. And what a query range, what a range query for Prometheus is, by the way, is just a bunch of instance queries run throughout the time frame that you've given it. So for this one, I queried CPU on my app over the last 5 minutes just to see any kind of standard output of, oh, okay, so this is fluctuating 22%, 25%, 25% on this one app. So the implications of being able to take just a standard Prometheus query and consume everything from your metric store is downstream monitoring. For example, if you take Grafana or something like that, you have those PromQL abilities built right in. So I can say, hey, more if I'm admin, I can say, hey, here is a standard query. I would like to be continually monitoring my CPU usage of my Doppler VM or what have you, whatever your metrics that you need to consume on a regular basis and chart are, you no longer have to be creating the app and the filtering for your own abilities to see the metrics that you've already got access to, but being able to chart them has become a much easier process because of the adoption and documentation around PromQL. Okay, so we've talked about app developers a little bit, but let's talk about platform operators. So I have more control from a platform operator perspective, specifically because I have access to the whole suite of things coming through the fire hose instead of just my app, right? So this includes component metrics and everything that comes along with that. So let's say that I wanted to see if I wanted to narrow down how to go about pulling information from my deployment. Okay, I would love to see what kind of information is sitting around in the fire hose instead of just streaming the fire hose and being like, oh yeah, I caught some of that and I was able to see that let's prioritize this field. I'm seeing job, I'm seeing IPs, I'm seeing all of this come through. I can just go and hit that labels endpoint. And this is just a selection of some of the labels that you would see in a standard deployment. Like you have filtering ability from job, you have, you can leverage everything from app ID, app name, down to, I mean, status of general apps, and then also like jobs and IDs of your components as well. So you've got a lot of control. Cool. Another platform operator example is perhaps using one of those labels that I would like to filter down on. You can be leveraging that query endpoint again against, like, let's see, I care about HTTP route count. So I would like to know how many routes are on my platform, how many of them are registered with the Go router. Great. I can just pop that right in metric store, and I can be getting those values back regularly. So it looks like on this deployment, there are 1.5 million routes registered. Cool. So just wrapping back up with the overall impact of metric store as a component downstream from your Cloud Foundry at this point. Once it's in the Loggregator throughput process, it becomes queryable with this very powerful language without having to stand up anything new, right? You plug in, it's currently in the experimental folder in Cloud Foundry deployment. You plug in a metric store and say, hey, please deploy this secondary deployment downstream from my Cloud Foundry. And then you've got all of this queryability power because anything that's going into your Loggregator is coming out and has stored itself in metric store. So the other thing that we get a lot of control from is PromQL's adoption by other technologies because so many things that you would want to use for graphing and monitoring and charting have adopted this standard. You get a lot of things for free. Like, for example, we previously talked about Grafana. That gives you a lot of leverage. Based off of your UAA identity, because this is not downstream and because we've integrated it with UAA and CAPI to be making those calls and saying what is your authentication level, it's not just for admin anymore, it's not just for platform developers. Anybody can be leveraging PromQL queries to monitor their app state. And then again, just a mature query language with good documentation gives us a lot of power. So like I said, that was sped up just a little bit. Do we have any questions at this time? Yeah.
So the last time I tried to get something, there was not an HA solution that was open source. Did you figure out how to solve that problem? Is metric store HA at all?
So at this time, metric store open source is a single node. That's what I'll go with right now. Yeah, right now the open source is single node. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's compatible back to PCF 2.4. And yeah, in terms of it is, we have a closed source version for PCF as well, yeah. Any other questions? Thank y'all.